Floating in the cold shadow of a dying world, the station aptly named Morn welcomed its survey shuttle back into the docking port, piloted by its lone crew member. Bathed in the cockpit's blue light, Lyra methodically unstrapped herself from the safety rigging and picked her way carefully through the shuttle's cramped corridor to what passed for its cargo hold. There, she stood over the creature's unconscious form. "Too late to change my mind now, isn't it?" she said aloud, her voice distorted through her suit's filters. She carried the creature to Morn's medbay and laid it reverently under the auto-dock. "The company is going to put me in a cell for a very long time when they find out about you," Lyra muttered, as she navigated through the auto-dock's activation sequence, overriding its insistent warnings. The pity she felt for this beautiful, luminous thing far outweighed the company's laws she was breaking by saving it. While the auto-dock did its work, Lyra's mind drifted to the shuttle in the port, and she wondered how far they could get before the company caught up to them. "Far enough," she said. "Maybe just far enough." Hello, and welcome to The Bad Spot, an actual play podcast in which I, Matt Risby, and I alone, am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. I hope you enjoyed the Tale from the Drift that opened up this episode. That was another wonderful community submission, this time from the mind of Tread26. And I absolutely love what he's done there, and I really enjoyed reading this one. And I want to offer a huge thank you to him for taking the time to write such a cool piece. If you want to write something for me to read at the start of a future episode, then these are the parameters. Tales from the Drift are 200 words or less, and use prompts from 3 rolls on any oracles you like. If you want to roll some dice and write something inspired by the results, then get in touch via the details on screen now. One final thing to get out of the way now, before we start, and that's to say that this week's episode is going to be the penultimate episode of the season. Now, I took a mid-season break at episode 12, so it stands to reason that we'd wind things up in episode 24, which will be next week. Because I am thrilled to say I will be taking the rest of the year off. Doing this show is hugely rewarding and immensely enjoyable, and I absolutely love doing it. But it's a lot of work, and if I did this every week, all year round, on top of working a day job and trying to live a healthy, balanced life, I would burn out and I would very much not love it. So I'll be taking breaks pretty regularly to avoid that. You've got to enjoy what you do, otherwise what's the point? And it also gives the audience a bit of a chance to catch up. I get a lot of comments and I speak to a lot of people who say they really enjoy the show, but if they fall behind, they feel a bit overwhelmed at just how much there is to get through to catch up. So this is going to be a bit of breathing space for them. And as I did on my last break, I will be posting some shorter content, mostly Ironsworn related, but then also maybe some Ironsworn adjacent content too. Now, my slate is by no means set for this content, so if there's anything specific you want to see me talk about whilst I'm on break, then why don't you let me know in the comments below? And whilst you're down there, why don't you leave a like, subscribe, and click the little bell icon so you can follow along with the campaign every step of the way. Last week, the crew of the Eclipse finally arrived at the deep space salvage outpost of Concord, where Archer is seeking out the conduit. Whilst jumping through the drift, Archer is poring over Professor Darwin's notes to try and see if there is anything that he may have missed after all these years. He is shocked to discover a transmission between the Professor and the Griffin Institute, which reveals that not only did the Institute know about the Iron Gates all along, but they specifically ordered the Professor to both activate and use one. Now, this is in direct contrast to what Archer knew or understood about the Gates, about the Institute, and about the Professor, and he makes the painful realization that he has been lied to all along. Still reeling from this information, he takes it out on Luna, who he commands to stay on the ship before he bids Keelan and Santos goodbye. Exploring the outpost of Concord alone, he learns from an astrolabe that not only is the conduit not here, but she has been captured and imprisoned on Sepulchre by Clan Thorn, where she awaits execution. Knowing that she may be the only person in the universe that can help him, Archer realizes he must break her out. So, Archer is going to have to pull off a good old-fashioned prison break. And I think this is going to be the only way he can get the information he needs. It's a somewhat desperate situation, you could say. The conduit is the only person he knows who would be able to help him, because she obviously has this kind of wealth of knowledge about the clans, and she's pretty much the central figure in this arms race that seems to be escalating. Plus, Archer suspects that she probably knows more than she's letting on about the Iron Gates. So if anyone is able to help him in this quest and find that super weapon before the clans, it's her. But she also cannot be trusted, and he is very much aware that she will double-cross him in a heartbeat. But, and this is a big but, by breaking her out of prison, it might just mean that she owes him something. So I think on Concord, I think our business is concluded. There is very little left to learn here. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to cut back to the eclipse. And I think that Archer enters the cockpit to find Luna sat kind of bored, reclining in the pilot's seat, maybe kind of toying with that little metal clan badge that she's been playing with the last few episodes. And Archer is kind of totally lost in thought, cycling all this information over in his head, trying to figure out how on earth he's going to pull off this incredibly dangerous sounding mission. And kind of Luna sees him and says, "You okay? I was going to say that you look like you've seen a ghost, but, you very recently have." And Archer doesn't even kind of catch on her tone, just says, "She's not here." Luna says, "So where is she?" "Sepulchre." "Sepulchre? It's a prison. I know what it is." And Archer doesn't say anything. He's kind of still processing. And Luna kind of catches on and says, "Oh no." And Archer still doesn't say anything. He's still kind of working it all out, trying to put the pieces together. And Luna says, "We're going to need help. You know that, right?" And Archer nods, still thinking. And that's when Luna leans over and starts punching some coordinates into the E-drive. And Archer says, "What are you doing?" And Luna says, "Well, someone's got to do something. We need help. And everyone you know is either in this cockpit, has disappeared through a magic space portal, or wants you dead. So you're a little short of options. Whereas I, on the other hand, know a guy." And Archer says, "Where are we going?" And Luna says, "Somewhere I never wanted to see again." And Archer doesn't have any better ideas. She is pretty much bang on the money. He's on his own and has no one to call on. And Luna vacates the pilot's seat because, she doesn't know how to fly. And she turns to Archer. And as Archer takes his seat, she stands behind him and says, "And Archer, don't ever treat me like that again. The way you spoke to me before. Do you understand?" And Archer nods as he sinks sheepishly into the pilot's seat, unable to make eye contact. He kind of presses a few buttons to get the ship ready, and he then pauses and says, "I've been on my own out here for a long time. I sometimes don't find it easy with people." And Luna leans in and puts her hand on his shoulder and says, "I understand, but that's no excuse. I'm on your team. I'm not your emotional punch bag. I need you to understand that." And Archer nods softly but doesn't say anything. And Luna says, I accept your apology. Now let's jump. We've got to go and see a man about a jailbreak. And we're going to cut to the Eclipse mid-jump. We are going back to Rust. We're going back to the place that Luna was desperate to escape. And I think having thought about this since last week, it makes sense that Luna would seek out Severnus Cain to help them. And I think the reason for that is he's like this union figure, the leader of these workers on that factory moon. He's the leader of the strike that was raging there the last time that we were there. And remember that the factories on Rust, they are manufacturers of E-drives, and Clan Thorn were desperate to take control of the whole place. But it's a racket. The whole thing is run by this criminal enterprise, this underworld syndicate are running things. And they've managed to keep the clans at arm's length and keep them at bay. But I think it's more than reasonable to suggest that Clan Thorn would have arrested and imprisoned agitators or political opponents who may have played a part in the strike or any other kind of like union activity. And I think that if that's the case, then it stands to reason that they would be imprisoned on Sepulchre. And if that's the case, it stands to reason that Severnus Cain might be interested in breaking them out. And also we have a bit of tension there because Cain is in some way connected to Blake Sutton because he gave Archer and Luna her details and told them where to find Paxton Hold, where they were captured and tortured. So this could be interesting. So anyway, we need to make a move, don't we? So we're going somewhere we've been before. And we've actually done this exact journey from Concord to Rust. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the move Set a Course, which says when you follow a known route through perilous space, across hazardous terrain, or within a mysterious site, roll plus supply. A strong hit. You reach your destination and the situation there favours you. Take +1 momentum. Up to 6. 6 momentum is starting to feel decadent. I'm not sure how comfortable I feel with that much momentum, to be honest. It feels a bit gauche. But anyway, we're here and the situation favours us, which is good. So let's envision this. The jump doesn't take very long. And Archer is still not saying anything. He's not very talkative. He's kind of feeling contrite towards Luna and also probably embarrassed by his own behaviour. Plus, he's still very much processing the information he learned about the professor. It's a lot. And Archer sees the buttons on the dash start to blink and he flicks a few switches to prepare the Eclipse to drop. And he takes the yoke and it starts to rumble in his hands, and the ship parts the curtain of red and purple light outside as it drops out of the drift. And Archer sees a familiar sight. A monstrous sandy yellow desert planet perfectly framing this dark red moon, the moon of Rust. Between the ship and the moon, there's this constantly circling belt of crystal asteroids. They kind of slowly tilt over and tumble through space and grinding up against each other, kicking loose these thick clouds of sparkling dust. And Luna joins Archer at the window and says, "Looks smaller than I remember." And Archer deftly steers the ship through this dense crystal asteroid field and passes the various mining ships that are taking crews out to extract the precious metals, and they also pass some security ships watching over the operation, but thankfully no clan ships. And whilst we rolled a strong hit and the situation favours us, I think that only really applies to us specifically, because I think that we've arrived without a hitch, that's certain. But like this moon, this place, Rust, was in a real state when we left it, this absolute kind of like chaotic state of upheaval and conflict. And it just doesn't make sense narratively for that to have just stopped while we've been gone. I think the situation has gotten a great deal worse, if I'm honest. The struggle on Rust didn't just pause because we left. The people who lived there continued their struggle, and I think that will be obvious to us on our arrival. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll on the Settlement Trouble Oracle to add a bit more detail about how this conflict has maybe developed or continued, and on top of the kind of ongoing labour dispute that was still in full swing when we were here last. So let's see what we can roll up on the Oracle. 47 is impending natural disaster. Okay, so the Moon of Rust, a quick refresher for everyone, and I'll be honest, I had to go back and listen to the episode in question 2, so don't sweat it. The Moon of Rust has this huge gash in its surface, and that is highly radioactive. Whatever made it left this kind of incredibly powerful source of radiation, which also acts as a power source for the entire moon. And there are these kind of regulation stations, these kind of power stations that modulate the control of that power. And whilst we were here last, Archer helped Luna blow one up. And the manufacturing plants and refineries that sit on either side of this gouge, this big nuclear canyon, the only way to cross between them is via these bridges, these kind of radiation-proof, if that's a thing, transports that kind of taxi to and fro between both sides. Now, last time we were here, those bridges had been blockaded by the striking workers, and they were stopping processed materials from the refineries moving across to the factories, which is what brought the work to a grinding halt. Now, we do know that there are kind of secret smugglers' tubes built into the bridges because Luna and Archer used them to cross the bridge last time they were here. But we just rolled impending natural disaster. So, what can that be? I think that it makes sense that in addition to this strife and all this conflict with the sides of this union dispute, I think the moon is slowly coming apart. I described it last time as almost like the bridges were kind of stitches holding this vast open wound in the surface together. And I wonder, since we've been gone, with all the disruption to the power regulation, which was, to be honest, our bad, I wonder if the whole moon is about to crack. And I think that's it. I think that the fissure in the surface is widening, and the whole thing is slowly coming apart and will finally split into two at some point. So yeah, I think as the eclipse kind of gets closer to the spaceport, I think what we're going to see is some significant change, some significant environmental change. I think there were 6 or 8 refineries and bridges, and I think that maybe there's only 2 bridges left. It's clear from orbit that all of the other bridges have collapsed into the chasm, and like the matching refineries are no longer kicking out smoke and soot. And I think it stands to reason that there is a wholesale exodus going on, that the tens of thousands of people who lived here, who worked here, who only ever worked here, are fleeing in droves. But most of these people don't have the means to just up and leave, and this place is run by a criminal syndicate. So there's like no social security safety net for these people. This place has fallen into almost like complete lawlessness, complete chaos. And there's workers kind of pooling all their resources together to get off this rock, and as a result, they're being taken advantage of by unscrupulous smugglers or just any spacer with a ship and kind of loose morals, I guess. Anyone looking to make a quick buck. So I think that as we kind of descend into the spaceport, there's this real kind of fall of Saigon vibe. And the Eclipse is like the only ship coming in to the arrival section. The departures is like chaos. lines and lines of desperate people and swarming around these transports, desperate to get airborne. And there's no shortage of ships and their captains here to kind of exploit this desperation. So yeah, it's a bad vibe. It's a real bad vibe. And after they've kind of landed, Archer and Luna come down the ramp into like the near empty hangar. There are no supply drops anymore, no merchant ships coming in, just transports of all shapes and sizes that are touching down and then leaving as soon as they arrive, stuffed full of as many people as can afford to get out. And Archer and Luna manage to push their way kind of out of the spaceport, forcing their way through the crowds of these kind of like gaunt, haunted looking workers, like broken by a life on the factory line, now left with nothing, abandoned to their fate by those that exploited them. Now, Archer and Luna push through the throng and out past the bar where they first met, past the window that Archer got thrown through for the privilege of trying to step into the fight that Luna was about to get involved in. Now he knows how that she handles herself. He probably would not have done that again. And yeah, that bar used to be like a noisy hub of activity and trade and commerce, but now it just seems to be this makeshift dorm full of people huddled together waiting for a ride out of there. And they move through the port towards the underground system, that kind of metro system that used to ferry the workers between the refineries. And it's not running. It's just kind of odd to Luna now to see a place that was so busy now so completely lifeless. So Luna leads them up a short staircase and they slip on their breathing apparatus and they exit out onto the dusty red surface of the moon of Rust. And from the ground, they can get kind of like a bit of a better view. There's clearly something still happening at one of the refineries because the smoke is still rising from the chimney stacks. But all the others seem to have been shut down and abandoned. There's no lights, no smoke, no nothing. And Luna points to that refinery with the smoke still rising. That's where they're going. She jogs around the corner over to a small building. Archer kind of follows. She kind of takes the rifle off her shoulder and she shoots out the lock on a roll-up shutter before she stoops down and pulls it up and open. And inside this small building are a pair of buggies, like we escaped on from the power plant. That one, it seems like a long time ago. Memories. One of the buggies is like completely trashed, I think. But the other one seems to be kind of like, vaguely operational. So Luna's starting to like check it over. And Archer turns back and looks at the scene ahead of them, what awaits them at the refinery. But then he feels this low rumble beneath his feet. This can't be good. And as he turns back to this little garage, he winces in pain. And he scrunches his eyes closed and kind of grabs his head in his hands. As he does, he sees this flash, this brief flash of an image. It's a structure made of twisted black glass, like a spire rising out of a rocky desert floor. And then another image, an image of flesh fused with metal. And then he hears screams, hundreds of screams. And then he opens his eyes and he is stood in front of the garage, lit by the headlights of the buggy that Luna has just started. She motions for him to get in quickly as she revs the engine. And Archer shakes that brief kind of episode off and gets in. Luna gives him the thumbs up symbol, and after a second he kind of returns it. But he's not okay. Luna puts her foot down and the buggy bounces across the dunes of the dusty surface of the moon. The desert world looms ominously in the horizon. It's got these endless, violent sandstorms swirling in its atmosphere. And as they draw nearer to the refinery, they pass scattered debris at the metro station. The train is still sitting on the tracks, blown apart by some huge explosion. And there are like bodies laying on the platform still, which has also taken a lot of heavy damage. There was clearly a major struggle here. And as they continue through more debris and they work their way towards the grubby, dirty, towering industrial chimneys of the refinery, and Luna kind of pulls the buggy over behind a service shack about 150 or so meters away from the main entrance, and they get out. Why do we think this one is still running? Why is this one still going if the others are all kind of dark and abandoned? And I wonder whether or not the syndicate, the criminal syndicate, or like the remnants of the criminal syndicate, are just trying to eke out every last resource from this place. And I wonder if, like, maybe most of the syndicate, this organization, has left, but there's like some particularly hardy sorts, some particularly bad sorts who have stayed behind, and they are like forcing a small contingent of people to carry on until the very last moment. And I even think they've got their own kind of transport ship, like docked like way over, and it's like heavily guarded. So yeah, the last remnants of this syndicate are here, and that's whoever is pulling the strings, plus like a small company of mercenaries. And I think as Luna is scouting the place out with her binoculars, she gestures to Archer to look too, and he kind of gets his little scope out and sees what he can see, and kind of catches sight of what he first mistook for just a building. But on closer inspection, it appears to be a big, boxy industrial hauler, the kind of ship that would transport a small fortune in like raw or processed materials through space. And that ship is guarded by half a dozen or so mercenaries, and they're all very, very heavily armed. So we're going to have to go through this place, right? We're going to have to enter this refinery. And remember, these are like small towns. People who worked here also lived here. And we're entering because we need to cross. And there ain't too many other options. There ain't 2 bridges left, and this is the nearest one. And we need to get through via the smuggler's tubes. Now, Luna knows these places like the back of her hand, so she's going to be taking the lead. But we're going to have to make a move for this. And I think the move is going to be face danger. And we're doing that because we are going to be trying to get through this refinery and reach the other side. But we're going to have to try and avoid whatever mercenaries are in control of this place. So I think that means we're going to have to try and stealth this. We're going to have to be very, very careful. So what we're going to do is we are going to be ducking down alleyways and using shortcuts that Luna knows to try and avoid the mercenaries the best we can, and then try and find one of these crossing points. So let's face danger, rolling, plus shadow. A strong hit. Okay, on a strong hit you are successful, take +1 momentum. And Luna leads Archer quickly and skillfully through the streets. And they kind of stop periodically to duck around a corner as the mercenaries patrol before they kind of push on. And the place is deserted. Every single person who lived there has gone. Even the residential bits, the streets where people lived, they're empty. Everyone who is here must be in the refinery. The only life they see, the only people they see are the guards, the mercenaries, walking their patrols, looking for anyone who has escaped or has otherwise absconded. And the buildings are ramshackle. They are a mixture of permanent buildings, permanent structures, and less than permanent extensions, cobbled together with scrap and waste materials. And there are possessions strewn across the streets, in addition to the occasional body. Whoever swooped in to take control of this place did so swiftly and did so brutally. And they emerge from this network of alleyways. And this place very much appears to be like a rabbit warren to Archer. The buildings are identical, the streets are identical, but Luna seems to know where they are and know where they're going. And they stop to duck down behind a generator as 2 mercenaries stomp their way past. They kind of listen for their footsteps to fade. And then Luna checks that the coast is clear. and motions for Archer to follow her across the street. And they come to another alleyway, and it looks much the same to the others to Archer. But this one has a cellar hatch in the floor, and Luna leans down and pulls the grated metal hatch open and motions for Archer to go inside. And they walk down this short set of steps into complete darkness. And Archer cracks his flashlight, lights up the small room. There are 2 large circular hatches on the back wall, but other than that, this room has nothing in it, save for an empty chair and a panel of switches on the wall between the 2 hatches. There's no operator here like there was before. Even they have abandoned their post, or perhaps worse. Luna opens the first hatch and waves Archer inside, and he climbs in and lays down on the sled. Luna fires up the operational panel, and Archer feels the mechanical grinding begin beneath him. Luna slams the hatch shut, and after a second, a low rumble starts to shake the sled, and then it lurches awkwardly forward before stopping. Then there's this whir, a screech, and then a loud metallic crunch before Archer feels himself hurtling through the tube at high speed. He grips on tightly as the sled accelerates, and the metal all around him, it's kind of yawning and creaking, and it doesn't really inspire confidence that this contraption is safe. And then after a while it starts to get hot. It gets really, really hot, and that's when Archer figures that he must be halfway across, that there's nothing below him except the sled, the metal of the tube, and then a gaping radioactive chasm. And in a few short minutes, the sled comes to an abrupt, skittering halt. He reaches up, can feel a metallic handle, and tries to leverage himself the best he can. He pulls the handle round, and the hatch opens with a hiss. He kind of awkwardly clambers out into a similarly sized room than the one he left in. It's dimly lit. Is there anyone there? Should we ask the Oracle? I'm going to say it's 50-50. 96 is yes. So the room is empty, except for a person wearing a mask. Now, are they hostile? Again, I'd say 50-50. 61 is yes. So the room is empty, except for the person wearing a mask, holding a gun to Archer's face. Archer slowly raises his hands. The person is wearing heavy overalls and a kind of like a gas mask, which has the kind of long muzzle and these kind of big round eyepieces. And how are they acting? 7. 7 is anxious. Well, you and me both. The person is agitated, nervous. The gun shakes in their hand. A light on the wall begins to flash, and the person with the gun notices. And Archer knows that in a few short seconds, Luna will be appearing out of the other hatch. So, shall we try and intervene here? Shall we try and do something so we both don't get shot, perhaps? I think Archer is going to have to. I could try and talk them round. I could try and compel them. But that doesn't seem right. And I think Archer, in a split second, is going to try and overpower them, which seems like a laughable concept. But here we are. I think this person is going to be distracted by the lights going off and the imminent arrival of someone else coming through the tubes. And I think that in that second, Archer is going to try and grab the gun and disarm them. So I think that's going to be face danger. And this time, using strength and aggression. So rolling plus iron. Okay. A weak hit says You succeed, but at a troublesome cost. Make a suffer move. Okay. So the light on the wall begins to flash, indicating that another sled is coming through, and that the person with the gun looks at the second hatch briefly, and that's when Archer makes his move. Kind of swiftly pushes the barrel of the gun upwards towards the ceiling and moves in behind them, kind of wrapping his free arm around the neck of the person, trying to wrestle them to the ground. And they kind of collapse in this kind of sprawling, ungainly heap of arms and legs, kicking and flailing. And Archer is desperately trying to overpower them, and in the process he catches a vicious right hook to the face as they attempt to free themselves, and Archer rolls off them, but kind of keeps his other arm clamped around the hand that's holding the gun, and now he's kind of laid on his front, and the owner of the gun is kind of clambering onto Archer's back, trying to wrestle his hand free, and Archer can feel his mask filling up with blood from the punch and can feel his grip loosening on the gun. So he kind of uses all his effort to kind of get on all fours and then to stand up and then to kind of force himself up and around and spin and tangle his legs between the legs of the gas-masked assailant. And then again they go tumbling to the floor, but this time Archer is in control. And Archer leans in, kind of angling his body so that the gun and the arm holding it will kind of land on the floor first with his full weight on top of it. And they go down quickly, and there's this sickening crunch and a yelp as they land, and the gun spins out of the hands of the gas-masked assailant and across the dirt floor of the room, where it comes to a stop at Luna's feet. Archer looks up. She picks up the gun, then helps him and the person to their feet. There seems to be a moment of recognition between them, even though she's wearing a mask herself and she's still wearing the kind of Clan Kraken woolen poncho. Luna's hair, I think, is the giveaway. That kind of streaked hairdo that she's got is pretty distinctive. And this guard recognizes her. Luna gives them the gun back, and they holster it with their good hand, cradling their other, probably broken wrist close to their chest. And Luna kind of turns Archer around by his shoulders and digs into his satchel. And she pulls out this little canister and snaps the end off and sticks it into the person's arm. So she's administering a bit of pain relief, and maybe she hands them like a fistful of those canisters. So I think that's reasonable to suggest that the suffer move we'll make is a hit to our supply. So we'll bump that down from 3 to 2. And that makes sense. And they leave the guard cradling their arm in the basement room with the smuggler's tubes, and Luna leads Archer up and out of the room and onto another street. And Archer recognises these streets this time because they've been here before. Although they did come via a different set of tubes from a different refinery. This is where the factories are. This is where the processed material comes over the bridge to be made into e-drives. This is also now completely abandoned, but only nearly completely abandoned, because every now and then they're passed by kind of desperate souls running through the streets, carrying whatever they can carry on their way to the smuggler's tubes and hopefully across the bridge and out of this godforsaken place. And the rumbling below ground, that kind of seismic activity comes again and then again, and after they've been walking for a few minutes, they reckon that these seismic movements are becoming pretty regular, and they share a worried look. Luna leads them to a square building that Archer remembers from the last time they were here, when they had the body of Kane's son after the sabotage of the power plant. This time there are no guards escorting them, no one standing watch. They just walk right up to the door, and Luna punches in a code, and it slides open. And they're once again in the long meeting room, with the banners hanging floor to ceiling on either side of that long conference table. And as the door slides closed behind them, they take off their masks. Archer has the coppery taste of his own blood in his mouth. He wipes his face with the back of his sleeve as they approach the table. There are a dozen or so chairs on either side, but they're all empty. But at the head of the table sits Severinus Kane. His metallic hands are stretched out, fingers drumming on a map laid out before him. He looks up as they near, and he laughs to himself. I'm guessing you aren't the reinforcements I sent for. And Luna shakes her head, and Kane begins to laugh even harder. Then it's over. They have won. Everyone has gone. Everyone has fled. Abandoned this place we fought so hard to hold. We gave everything. And Luna says, "You've done all you can, but it's time to go." And Severinus shakes his head and says, "I have failed all those who have gone before. Their struggle and sacrifice ends with me. Here." And Luna says, softly, "Severinus, we need your help." And he looks at her gravely and says, "I can't help you." And that's when Archer moves round the table, flanking him on the other side, and says, "Do you know what is happening out there? The moon is breaking up. The chasm is widening, and I have no idea how long until the last two bridges fall, but they will fall. You need to come with us. You can't help your people here anymore. You've done all you can. But you can still help your people. You can die here at the head of an empty table, or you can come with us and free your brothers and sisters in arms." And I think we're going to have to make a move now. And that move is going to have to be compel, isn't it? And I feel like the last time we were here, we had to compel Severinus, so this is kind of becoming a thing, but needs must. So we're going to try and do this rolling plus heart, and we'll use Luna's companion ability here if we need to. So let's roll. Okay, a strong hit, and thankfully no need to use Luna's ability, which is lucky because I haven't figured out how to do that on the dice roller yet. So moving on. On a strong hit, they will do as we ask, or agree to our conditions and take +1 momentum. So up to 8 momentum now. Okay, so I think that whilst we make a compelling case for him to come with us, words I don't think will be enough to prompt Severinus into action. So I think that after Archer has kind of made this plea, made this speech to him, there is this big tremor, bigger than all of the ones that have happened since they crossed. And it shakes the whole building and causes all three of them to kind of hold on to something to steady themselves. And as it passes, one of the banners falls from the ceiling, and Severinus moves over and picks it up, holding it in his metallic hands, studying the delicate embroidery in the fabric, and he says to himself, "I have failed you." And then he turns to Archer and Luna and says, "I won't leave anyone behind. I won't leave them to suffer." And Luna nods, kind of despite realizing how hard that is going to be. And she says, "And we need a ship. We can't get where we're going on the Eclipse." And Archer says, "The hauler at the refinery. We could use that." And Severinus is folding the banner carefully into a small triangle And Luna says, "But it's heavily guarded." And Kane says, "How many?" Luna says, "We saw 10 at least, maybe more inside the refinery." And Kane nods and says, "Allow me some time to gather what I need. I shall meet you on the other side, at the junction." And Luna says, "We are counting on you." And Kane says, "And I on you." And with that, he disappears through a door, the banner folded under his arm. And shortly after, there is another pretty sizable aftershock, causing the lights to kind of flicker on and off, and dust and debris and dirt falls down from the ceiling. And Archer and Luna share a look that kind of says they need to leave immediately. And they retrace their journey so far, back through the streets and to the room with the smuggler's tubes, and they take the journey across the chasm, which is no less terrifying for Archer this time round, and the bridge that they are hidden in seems somehow even less stable than it was coming over, but they make it across, and Luna leads them to the place where Severinus said they were to meet, the junction. And that's all it is. It's a meeting point of the two main thoroughfares between all these buildings and domiciles. And it looks like every other street to Archer, they all look the same. But Luna says this is the junction, so it must be the junction. So here they wait. And they wait. And they wait. And the mercenaries pass on their route once, twice, 3 times. And Archer is starting to feel nervous. Severinus did not seem all there. He's clearly been destroyed by this conflict, and everything he has stood for is now lost. And now they turn up asking for help. Archer knew it was a long shot. He knew it was a stretch. And that's when Archer winces in pain once again. And he sees the spire in the desert when he forces his eyes shut. He hears the screams. He sees metal and flesh fused together. And he shakes his head clear. And when he opens his eyes, he sees Luna. She's full of concern. She gives him the thumbs up signal again. But this time, he shakes his head. He doesn't know what's happening to him. Luna looks back across the junction. There's no one there, and she looks worried. She turns to see the guards pass by the mouth of the alleyway again, and she's starting to think of a plan B. She's starting to think of a backup. But as she does, there is a brief flash of laser fire, and one of the mercenaries drops to the floor. And then there is a cloaked figure stood next to the other. The figure wrenches the gun out of the mercenary's hand and then slams a metallic fist into their chest with incredible force. And it just straight up collapses the chest plate of the mercenary's armor, and they crumple into a heap on the floor, motionless. Severinus Kane gestures for them to join him, and as they do, 4 more hooded figures come out of the shadows. Kane's most trusted lieutenants did not abandon him and are here to fight to the bitter end. It's not much, but it's something. And as we know, something is better than nothing. So, what are we doing? We need to liberate this refinery and get off this moon before it breaks in 2. It's pretty straightforward. So I think what I'm going to do is I am now going to make the battle move. Now, we've made this move a few times in the past, and we do this when we're looking to condense a long, kind of maybe complicated fight into one roll. And it's high stakes, it's fairly risky, because during the ebb and flow of a normal combat, the balances can shift to and fro. But with a battle, if it goes badly, it's all on that one roll. And I think that this would probably shape up to be a long, complicated combat with lots of moving parts and combatants. So I'm just going to put it all on a roll of the dice. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this rolling plus heart, because I am fighting depending on courage, leadership, or companions. So let's do this, shall we? A miss. Now, I'm alright with that because I'm going to burn my momentum of 8 to make that a strong hit, so that's fine. Momentum goes down to the reset of 2, and then it says, on a strong hit, you achieve your objective unconditionally and take 2 momentum. So we're instantly back up to 4. So not a terrible thing to happen. So how does this go down? What I'm going to do here is I think I'm going to envision this scene a little differently. I think that Archer and Luna and Severinus and his lieutenants huddle up and they make a plan. Now, they all know the lay of the land better than Archer, so he is pretty much a passenger here. They plan this out so that they take out the patrolling guards, then they split up, then one group heads to the refinery and the other goes to the ship. And Archer is kind of struggling to concentrate as he tries to listen, tries to focus. Because in his head right now, there's this twisted jumble of images and sounds. He's trying his level best to keep it together, but he's failing. Since Paxton Hold, he has felt different. And since the haunted derelict, he has been plagued by these visions that he can't explain. And as he is stood, listening to the plan being made, he completely zones out. And as he does, he finds himself suddenly stood in a rugged, rocky desert, standing before a twisted, black glass spire, unlike anything he has seen before. Except he has seen it in his visions. He reaches out to touch it, and as his hand gets closer, he suddenly is back on Rust, and he is stood, gun in hand, over the body of a mercenary, a smouldering laser burn singeing the armour. Up ahead, Luna is rounding a corner, desperately waving for Archer to follow her, to keep up. And he starts to run. He breaks into a sprint. And when he gets to the corner, he turns. But he's back in the desert, once again, reaching out to the spire. He gets closer and closer. And then he places his palm upon the glass. And then he catches his reflection. And then he's back on Rust. But he's in the refinery this time. Ducking behind machinery as sparks rain down on him, gunfire fills the air, slamming into the industrial metal all around him. He stands up to return fire, only to find himself back in the desert, staggering back from the glass. The air is filled with screams, which he tries to block out with his hands and clamps them over his ears. He falls to his knees, and then suddenly dozens of hands emerge from the sand below him, grasping at him, clawing at him. Hands that are fused with black iron, crudely stamped through the flesh, following the lines of the bones. He gets to his feet, and then he's back on Rust. This time, stood at the loading ramp of the industrial hauler. It's quiet. He's on his own. He is surrounded by the bodies of mercenaries. Luna calls out, "Archer!" And he turns to see her, running up to him, out of breath. She says, "What happened? We got pinned down in the refinery." And then she sees all of the bodies and says, "What did you do?" And Archer looks up at her and says, "I don't know." And now we're going to leave Archer and Luna and Rust and move to another place entirely. We are in a long metallic corridor that is buffed to a high sheen. Lining each side of the corridor are heavy doors, each with a sliding viewing hatch. Outside every door, a Clan Thorn Bannersworn stands guard, armoured, rifle at the ready. We hear footsteps slowly approaching, and the Bannersworn stand to attention as Azrael Vega passes each cell. He stops to look through one viewing hatch, pulled aside by the guard. Inside, the conduit lays on her bed, awaiting her inevitable fate. She doesn't even look over. In the next cell, Vega looks through the hatch to see an older woman, grey hair shorn on one side, the tattoo of a kraken crawling up her neck and face. Vega smiles at Blake Sutton as she sits on the edge of her bed, grim-faced and resolute. And he moves to the next cell, where inside is a man who we've not seen before. He has reddish brown skin and straight black hair. It's difficult to gauge his height and build because he is nearly completely covered in restraints. He looks up at Vega and winks. The hatch slams shut. We continue to follow Azrael Vega as he walks past many more cells and down many more corridors. We then see him enter an elevator and descend down for some time. He exits and walks down another short corridor towards a set of larger double doors. The doors are flanked by two figures in heavy protective clothing. They pull open the doors and Vega steps into a room filled with grey, ashy dirt. The room is full of other people in protective gear, breathing apparatus, hazmat suits, all busily working around a large iron gate. One of the figures approaches. It appears to be an officer of some kind, who says, "Everything is ready for you, sir. We finished decrypting Sutton's network map an hour ago." And Azrael nods slowly, before pulling a stool into the centre of the room and sitting down. "What now, sir?" "We wait." "For what, sir?" "To see if he'll take the bait." Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe if you have not done so already, and click that little bell icon so you can be notified when the next episode drops. I will be back next week for the season finale, but until then, it is farewell and safe passage.